اللهم اغفر لنا وارحمنا وانت خير الراحمين. ربنا ظلمنا انفسنا وان لم تغفر لنا وترحمنا لنكونن من الخاسرين. ربنا اتنا في الدنيا حسنه وفي الاخره حسنه وقنا عذاب النار. ربنا اصرف عنا عذاب جهنم ان عذابها كان غراما. واخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين. So the topic for tonight, inshallah, is very specifically addressed about the youth of the Ummah. I'm speaking about this topic in light of, this the situation in India with hijab and our sister that stood up in the face of, the people trying to get her to take off hijab. And I just want to talk about a broader conversation, but I just want to go back as to understanding, why they do this. What is it that is so provocative about hijab per se? And I think we have to understand and be very aware as Muslims, whether we live in the US or live in Europe or live in other parts of the world, not just of, they hate the hijab, right, or whatever. I think that's a very simplistic view of the situation. It's a broader question about Islam. It's a broader question about Islam. And so what I'm going to talk about today is really, our youth, specifically speaking to our youth. So if you're in the audience and you're a younger youth, this is all for you. There's a lot of detail here, right? So listen up. But the thing I want to go back to about this notion of hijab, whenever you have a colonizer throughout history come in and invade a country, let's talk about India for a second. Let's talk about India. When India was colonized by the British, how many people here are from India? So you all know this, right? The people that resisted the occupation were actually the Muslims. Now, if you look at the history of India, if you look at, for example, Palestine today, who was actually resisting the occupation? They're the Muslims, right? In Algeria, when the French occupied, who was resisting? It was the Muslims. The same is true for India. The India are the ones that fought actively against British occupation, and that is the right to do so. So when the British wanted to fix that problem, they wanted to fix the Muslim problem. When the French wanted to fix the Algerian problem, you have to understand the mindset of the colonizer is that this country is now theirs. You understand? Like this country is now theirs. So the French considered Algeria part of France. So therefore they must think like the French, dress like the French, eat like the French, believe like the French, irrespective of what they had before. Right? And for the British, it was a similar thing. For the British, they looked around and they said, okay, this country has different religious groups, different groups of people, different cultures, but who are the ones that are causing the most problem? Oh, it's these Muslims. Why is it these Muslims? Well, look, they have this deen that they follow, and this deen is not just about worshipping in a temple. The deen is not just about coming to the masjid and making dhikr. Yes, that's part of the deen. That's not the only thing about the deen. Right? Islam is a religion of activism. The Prophet ﷺ, if you could go back and see him in all throughout his life, but especially in the early days of Mecca. The early days of Mecca, and I bring the early days of Mecca because in the Meccan period, the Muslims were weaker, not stronger. They didn't have alliances, there were not many Muslims, there were not many rich Muslims, they didn't have weapons, they couldn't defend themselves. But the Prophet ﷺ, even in that capacity, played the role of what we would call today an activist. Today when you say, oh, mashallah, this brother, oh, mashallah, this sister, they're an activist. An activist is someone who is trying to change society for the better. That's the definition of an activist. Right? The sister in India that resisted to take off her hijab is an activist, and she's a mujahid fi sabilillah. Right? And she strikes so many different examples of other heroes we have throughout history. Many, many, many heroes. She's just the most modern of them. And there will be many that come after her, inshallah. So the colonizer, in order for them to fix the problem, whether it's the occupation of the British, the colonialism in India, whether it's to keep the Algerians subjugated or whatever, the first thing they must do is when they identify this problem of Islam as an activist deen, where the deen itself is about resistance of occupation, they must fix or break the identity of the Muslim. The problem is one of identity, not just one of hijab. Hijab is just the tip of the iceberg. Hijab is a problem because hijab is visible for them. They see it with their eyes and they're provoked by it. For some of you that may know, France, one of the most racist countries against Muslims, just to call out another one in Europe. they have this law, right? They have this law that prohibited the burkini. You guys know what I'm talking about? Like a Muslim woman cannot go swimming in a full bodysuit. That's not allowed. You're allowed to go naked, wal'iyadu billah, right? But you can't go if you're dressed top to bottom in a suit that actually doesn't show your body and you decide to even swim in the ocean. There's a very famous picture, if you look on the internet, from a few years ago, where the police are surrounding the sister in a burkini because she's dressed in a burkini, and they're basically telling her one of two things. Either you take it off or you leave. Now, like, look at the mindset. So the mindset is one of breaking the identity, and the other one that we should also understand is a mindset of superiority. They're better, quote unquote, and I'm using this between quotes, they're not better than us, they're better than us. Their culture is stronger than ours. They're richer, they have more science and more technology, and therefore they're more, and I'm using all of these between quotes, they're more civilized. And if they're more civilized and you're on the weaker side, then they get to tell you what to do. You understand the mindset of the colonizer, of the occupier? This is what it's been all throughout history. This is not a new thing. All throughout history, whether it's the French or the British or whoever it was, even from the most ancient of times. Even at the time of the Romans, at the time of the Greeks, they worshipped many different gods. Right? They worshipped many different gods. When a king came to occupy a city, so a battle happens between two cities, one king wins over the other king. The first thing, or one of the first things that the new king does, whenever they bring in their own god for everyone in the occupied city to worship. Do you understand? They bring in a new god. So a new statue, new figures, and all the old ones are destroyed. Because this is the one, that's more superior. Not to go on a tangent, but many of the Mufassirin say this is what happened with Ashab al-Kahf. The youth of the cave, when they left in resistance and in rebellion against the worship of this new thing, it was because their city had been invaded by someone new that came with a new kind of ilah, to worship, and so they leave the city and they go and they spend 300 years in the cave. I know many of us say this. So whether it's occupation in Africa, whether it's in India, so the hijab for them is a visible thing, and it provokes them. And they do it because they feel superior and more important. They do this because they want to feel like they're in command and they can subjugate you. And there's other reasons they do it. Now in the modern era, right, there's this notion of humanism. I don't know if people, humanism is basically this notion of we want all humanity to be good, and we want everyone to be respected, and we don't want anyone to be put down. It has some benefits, this concept of humanism. But it also has other disadvantages, many other disadvantages, including the situation of the hijab. Why? Because in the concept of Western humanism, the hijab is a way to subjugate women. They don't understand that the hijab, the Muslim sister, is wearing it because she wants to wear it. This is part of her identity. This is part of her identity, right? No one, none of us go in Islam as a general rule. You can't force anyone to do anything. As it relates to deen, there's no لا إكراه في الدين قد تبين الرشد من الغي. There's no point in threatening someone with a stick or with a whip or whatever that they have to put the hijab on or they have to do that. It doesn't count. If it's not in the heart, it doesn't count for anything. So they don't understand that the Muslim sister that is wearing the hijab is wearing the hijab out of her own volition. And these humanists consider that in coming to get them to take off the hijab, it's for better for you. We're liberating you. We're making you, and they're just like, wait a minute, how is it better? Well, no, it's okay. She's wearing it because her mother taught her to wear it, and her mother taught her to wear it. And so it's just a tradition. It's just a tradition. She doesn't know that it's not good for her. Like, wait, but how is your educating your children to have a boyfriend and a girlfriend in school a good thing? Who taught you that that's a good thing? What was your parents and your grandparents and your grandparents before that? How is your thing better than my thing? Whoever came to that conclusion? We believe that this is part of our deen. As Muslims, this is part of our deen. This is a non-negotiable. The same way that we come for prayer, we fast in Ramadan, we go and make the Hajj. This is a similar part of the identity of the Muslim. So conclusion number one for us is to understand where it comes from. Number two is what's important for us in America and how to apply it is how our children grow up with an Islamic identity. And I use this in the most, absolute sense of the definition. The problem we have with these children when they grow up is not whether or not they're going to be wearing a long thing or whether they're going to prefer pizza over biryani. That's not the problem. That's not the problem for us. The problem for us is when they get older, are they going to know the difference between haram and halal? It doesn't matter whether they want to eat pizza, halal pizza in New York with no pork, or whether they want to go to a Pakistani restaurant, Indian restaurant, eat biryani. That's not the problem. They can have, both are halal, inshallah. The thing about them is maintaining their Muslim identity so that they pass it on to generation after generation. So in the case of India, this is what you have. Of course, you have a racist government, a fascist government that's against all minorities, trying to impose Hindu rule. Again, I'm broadening this example beyond India. The same as what happened in Algeria. The French had a perspective, we're better than you, you're backward. You Algerians, you're backward. When the Europeans came to America, what did they do? How did they think about the Native Americans here? Oh, they're backward. Look at what they do. They're not even civilized. What happened when they went to Africa? Oh, look, what clothes do they wear? Look at this, look at this. So the mindset is a mindset of bigotry, of superiority, right? Of racism, and whatever they can touch at the pinnacle to disassociate the Muslim identity from how they want to rule and operate is how they function. Now, we haven't even gotten into what I prepared, but let me just add one additional thing. If you know human history, if you know Muslim history, right, over the last few centuries, right, they came and many of them occupied Muslim lands, right, and they failed at many things. The purpose of the occupation failed at many things, whether it's the French in Egypt or the British in India, or whether it was the French in Algeria. They failed, alhamdulillah, against many things, right? But they succeeded in one thing. They succeeded in leaving certain people behind that think like they do, that function as their proxies. You understand? Whether it's a military dictator or whether it's a king, it doesn't matter what title they have, but these people left behind over the generations effectively, grew up in their kind of culture thinking that they're my master, they're superior, so I must do as they say. I must wear as they say. My country, Egypt, I'll give you very visible example. Anyone here from Egypt? So, okay, only 3 Egyptians, 2, 4, no, Suri, Neshur. Here's a green card Egyptian. So, if you watch on a serious note, if you watch Egyptian movies, okay, I'm not a fan of Egyptian movies. If you watch Egyptian, not suggesting you do this, across the 50s and 60s in particular, black and white, there's no color TV, right? And Egypt was the Hollywood of the Middle East, right? In those days, the concept of a hijab was very foreign, even in society. The concept of hijab, Egypt is a Muslim country. Alhamdulillah, now that we don't have that problem now. But back then, it was a unique concept. Not unlike what happened in Turkey with Ataturk, right? And he takes it and puts it in the brick, throws it in the ocean. Oh, now the women have been liberated because I threw the hijab in the ocean. That mindset existed throughout many different countries, Egypt included, right? In the 70s, the exception was that you have the hijab, not the rule. Now, passing on through history, the 80s and the 90s, you start to see the revival of the Ummah. You go to Cairo now, there's hardly anyone now wearing a hijab. From the revival of the spirit. And this, I'm just giving example of Egypt as a cross-section, but this applies to many other countries as well. Pakistan is probably very similar in that same kind of nature, right? Where there's a period of time, mid-20th century, not that long ago, where the concept of the hijab was like, why are you so backward? Why are you wearing the hijab? But now and by the way, the sisters that wear today might not all be for deen. And you know what? That's okay too. That's okay too. Because inshallah, one day, you know what it's like? That's like the Muslim that, the Muslim that fasts and doesn't pray. I heard this when I lived in Australia a long time ago, I heard this amazing fatwa by Sheikh Yusuf Qaradawi. I loved it. And he was being asked in Ramadan, he said, what about the Muslim, Sheikh, that's fasting, and they don't even pray? Like, does it count? And he had a magnificent answer. He said, of course it counts. So, like, who are you to tell him it doesn't count? But you make the dua that he or she is fasting, and then inshallah they'll catch up with their prayer. But don't block them right from the beginning. This is a similar thing. So throughout the ummah, there's a big revival, right, of the Muslim identity. I'll just say hijab is just part of it, reflective on the sisters. Now, last thing that I'll just say that we should all know is the hijab, by the way, applies to men and women. Hijab applies to men and women. How many people knew that? Okay, everyone, alhamdulillah, knew that. Hijab applies to men and women. But what's different in Islam is the extent of the hijab. The sister has to cover her hair, cover her arms up to her hands and so forth. The brother also has a hijab, but the extent of the hijab of the brother is different by Sharia. The extent of the hijab of the brother is from here to here, right? But the brothers still are not okay to wear, super tight, skinny jeans that, show your figure. That's still not okay from a Islamic perspective. That's not okay for the men, right? Let alone for the women, right? So this is kind of just, what I wanted to cover. And it's a broad conversation. We can talk about it more. I just wanted to touch on that so that we understand, the struggle for identity. So it's an important thing that we should understand, that the thing that drives them crazy the most, like the French are now, if anyone here following the French elections or knows what's going on in France, the French have the most extreme set of candidates, trying to become right. Like, if anyone knows the current French president, you'll know that he is very anti-Islamic, polarizing, etc., etc. The candidates that are in line that are going up against him are even worse than he is. One of them is actually saying he's going to propose a law that no new babies born in France can be called Muhammad. Can you imagine? Can you imagine how crazy they've gone? Like, this is craziness. This is craziness, wallahi. Right? And the thing that we should know, my brothers and sisters, is ultimately the victory is for Islam. Wallahi, no matter how high a horse they ride, and how much they scream, and how much money they control, and how much media they can direct, at the end, what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say? يُرِيدُونَ لِيُطْفِئُوا نُورَ اللَّهِ بِأَفْوَاهِهِمْ. They want to extinguish the nur of Allah. What is the nur of Allah? It's Islam. It's the Quran. This is the nur of Allah. They want to extinguish the nur of Allah بِأَفْوَاهِهِمْ, with their mouths. They came against the sister, and I don't know what they were saying, but they were clearly yelling at her, take off your hijab, blah, 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 blah. The same way that in the French parliament they're having these debates, the same thing. Convincing them with their mouths that you people, look at that. Why put this stupid thing on your head? Why do this? Why do that? This is how they work. My mother, I'll tell you a story about my mother. So my mother grew at a time, remember when I was telling you the Egypt in the 50s and 60s. My mother went to, the time that she was growing up, the best schools were actually the foreign schools that were leftover missionary operations. Right? This is in Cairo, and she'll tell me this story. So it was run by a set of convent sisters. Actually, the school I went to, the first school I went to in Cairo was a Catholic school. The first school I went to. But the difference is we had deen, we had this, we had that, but it was effectively a Catholic school. It had a church inside, and the Christians, when it was time, they used to go to the church. I remember this vividly. And now she tells me another thing. She tells me that when it was time in Ramadan for her, when it was Ramadan time, and these teachers that were effectively nuns, they were nuns and teachers, like nuns, you see nuns and nurses, nuns and teachers, they were nuns and teachers. So they would go to her and her friends that were Muslims, and they would say, you're fasting in Ramadan, really? Isn't it too hot for you? Don't you want a cup of water? She remembers, she'll tell me this story. SubhanAllah,
she, the sister, this nun, is not going to get anything from a little girl giving a drink of water in Ramadan. But her purpose is what? What's her underlying purpose? Your thing doesn't make sense. Your thing is backward. Your thing makes you, thirst and hunger in the middle of summer. Your thing makes you pray all the time. Your thing to the point where they start to disassociate you. There's a very famous book. I don't know if I've mentioned this here before or not, called Izharul Haq. Is there another book? Izharul Haq. No. Okay, I'm surprised. Who here's from India again? Raise your hand. Raise your hand. Raise your hand really high. Okay, go get this book. Actually, we should all get this book, but especially if you're ready to get this book. Izharul Haq means the revelation of the truth. Let me just tell you about this story, and then we'll finish, inshallah, with the hijab and start to talk about the youth, which is as important. Izharul Haq, at the time of British occupation of India, so I told you that British are like, hey, it's these Muslims, it's this and that. Well, how do you break away the Muslims from their deen? How do you make them stop this thing called jihad? Well, one of the ways you can do it, you can fight them, and they fought and they lost. Like, you guys know the British were defeated in Afghanistan pretty badly, and look, we know this, right? We know that the history of the British occupation. So they decide to bring priests from London, from England, trained priests, to convert the Muslims or at least shake their foundation in Islam. Okay. So they go door to door, knocking on the door, and they say, "Hey, you're a Muslim. Let me tell you about this. Let me tell you about the Trinity. Let me tell you." Well, the whole idea of converting them, from Islam, to Christianity. And at the end, they said, "Well, that's not working so well in the villages. Why don't we just get their Grand Mufti, their Grand Imam? Like, think of the Imam of Azhar, the Imam of Azhar of India. I mean, he wasn't Azhar Imam, but he was one of their biggest ulama. And we're going to have a debate with him on stage, in front of everyone, to embarrass him, and so therefore to prove that Islam is a weak religion." So this particular person, his name is Rahmatullah Qayrawani. His last name is Qayrawani, right? And he actually so he debates with this Britisher. He debates with this Britisher, and they're on the stage. This is a really, really famous story. He debates with them on the stage, and this is historically true. All the villagers are around them, packed, and of course in those days they didn't have microphones. So when someone would say something, the first row would say to the second row, would say to the third row, until it got to the very back, and so forth. So he's having a debate with them. It's a very, very long debate. But one of the questions, I'll just say this, it has a good outcome, so don't worry. The debate's going back and forth, and this Sheikh, mashallah, he proves actually in front of them that the Bible has many fallacies, right? By the way, he wrote his research in a 3-volume book, the Sheikh Qayrawani, and it's actually considered the foundation for, if you want to have debate with Christians or whatever, his book is still the kind of the reference, one of the great references for this kind of thing. Speaking about the Bible and the Quran and so on and so forth, and all the things they bring up. But anyway, he got to the point at the very end of the debate where this priest, and you could see the trickery in it. He was telling him he said something like, "Isn't your Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam loved by God?" And the Sheikh said, "Yes." And he said, "Where is he now?" And he said, "He's in heaven." And then the Sheikh said, "Where was he when his grandson was slaughtered on the battlefield?" Right? And the Imam paused, and he said, "He was in heaven." And he said, "Well, if he's so important and so loved by God, and he's close to God like you Muslims claim, why did he ask God for help?" And the Imam paused. He paused for a very long time. So much so that, I was telling you the story about the front row telling all the way to the back row, they were getting worried because the back row, "What did he say? What did he say?" And they're not getting an answer. So the Imam said, he actually asked for help. He actually called God to help. He said he asked God for help, really? Now I'm giving it to you quickly, but the description is like this priest is all dressed up, pompous on a high stage, walking back and forth. This Imam was a very simple man, he was an older man. And he's walking up and he's like, come on, give me the answer. Come on, what's the answer? And the Imam said he asked for help, and he said, what happened? Why did God not help him? And the Imam said, God cried. And the priest was blown away. The priest was like, what? Are you out of your mind? What are you saying? How can you say God cried? How can you say this? How can you say that? And the Imam said, because God told him, if I couldn't save my own son on the cross, how could I save your grandson on the battlefield? And everyone laughed, and this was literally the end of the debate. This was the end of the debate. And the point that I'm trying to make here, my brothers and sisters, is the debate with the other side and the argumentation. There isn't always going to be Qala Allah, Qala Rasul. You have to use your intelligence and how these people think. You know, whoever said to the French that it's completely normal for a woman to walk up, you know, completely half naked, live in relationships that are illicit, not do this, not do that. Who's to tell us we're wrong in what we do when we want to have a marriage where the family is known and the lineage is known and the woman is respected? Who's to tell us we're wrong? So the second, you know, the last thing I'll just say about this topic is we should all have our own respect, especially the younger generation, but certainly the older generation as well, and the confidence that you're on the right path. Don't let them put you down. Don't ever let them put you down. Don't ever let them make you feel like you're a second-class citizen. Don't ever do that. We live in this country, we pay taxes like everyone else. We have the same rights like everyone else. I can get a lawyer just like anyone else, and you can do the same. You can do the exact same thing. So we should stand up for our rights. Even in those most basic, simple things, we have to stand up for them. Don't just let it pass. See, we're a very kind ummah. The ummah of Ismail alayhi salam is a very kind ummah. Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says so in the Holy Quran. Right? فَبَشَّرْنَاهُ بِغُلَامٍ حَلِيمٍ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Holy Quran, we gave Ibrahim the bushra of a ghulam halim, a young boy who is halim. Hulm in Arabic means they're very kind, they're very merciful, they're very generous. You know, in a post 9/11 world, the FBI was coming and knocking on the door, and all people say, "Ahlan wa sahlan, assalamu alaikum, come on in. Would you like some lunch?" When the thing we should have said is, "I'm not going to talk to you. Give me your business card, and I will call my attorney, and he'll get in contact with you to find out what you need. I don't need to talk to you at all. These are my rights." Right? And the Quran, these words in the Quran, they mean things. Like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses precise language. What does he say about Ishaq alayhi salam? فَبَشَّرْنَاهُ بِغُلَامٍ عَلِيمٍ. Alim. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes the ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he describes the ummah, our ancestry through Ismail alayhi salam as halim, meaning kind, generous, merciful, loving, etc. The other is alim, knowledgeable. Not knowledgeable in a bad way. I don't mean knowledgeable, but knowledgeable meaning, they're not, they're up for catching you when they need to. They'll catch you when they need to, right? They're not like, oh, come on to my house, let me give you some samosas and walk away and kiss each other and be friends. Like, they're not like that, right? So anyway, I just wanted to say that. I realize we went too long and didn't get into this. I'm happy to do this next week, inshallah, before we start. What do you guys think? You want to do a little bit or get going? Keep going? Okay. Okay, so we won't spend too much time, okay? You keep me honest, okay?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Yalla bismillah. So this is still related to the conversation we're having, right, about this sense of identity, but really this conversation is biased to the youth of the ummah. So if you're in the audience and you consider yourself a youth, it doesn't matter if you're 4 or 5 years old or 50 years old, you're a youth. So this still applies to you, right? And the key thing, the key thing is that this ummah was all built on the shoulders of the youth, right? Like I actually have a statistic that I was going to start to share with, actually from Cairo University, where they took a cross-section of the youth and they ran a questionnaire, right? This is about 10 years old, maybe a little bit longer. And they asked these students, last 2-3 years of education, across all kinds of sciences, they asked them, what are you most concerned about? What are you most concerned about? So this is what they said. Number one, afraid of not having a job. right? Number 2, late marriage. Can't afford to get married, so I won't get married until I'm 30 or 40. Number 3, mixing of men and women and the negative implications. Number 4, drugs. Number 5, a huge divide between the generations. I speak, my parents don't understand, or my lecturer doesn't understand me, right? I'm behind in my studies, or I'm just studying for the test. In other words, I'm not learning necessarily at the university, I'm just here for the test. Relationship issues, it could be with the father, it could be with the mother, it could be with friends. Economic issues, not enough money to make things work. All of these are real problems across the Ummah. I'm using Cairo University as an example, but these problems are across the whole Ummah. They're not just specific to, to Cairo or these particular students. And these are important things. These are important things, right? By the way, there were worse answers. Do you want to know what the worst answers were? Does anyone want to know? So let me give you the worst answers. So the worst answers were: I want a new cell phone. I'm missing some ringtones. They don't have some latest video game, PS3 at the time, PS4, whatever, right? They want to go to some trips or a movie. Indiana Jones was very popular in those days, right? So those are the worst answers. I gave you the general, the 90th percentile of students. What they said, these are the losers now, right? These are the 10% of the losers. The point that I'm trying to make is that while these are very important things, the real problem we have as an ummah, in my opinion, is the lack of ambition. The lack of ambition. These things are good things, they're honorable things. To get a good job, to be successful, to get married, etc. These are all good things. Be it buy your BMW M3 with spinner wheels, fantastic, go do that, right? Those are all good things. But we should have a higher ambition. We should shoot for a higher ambition. Does anyone here work for Amazon? Yeah, well, only you work for Amazon? Really? Okay. So that leadership principle, think big? Okay. So Brother Jafar knows what I'm talking about. Like there's a leadership principle that they have called think big. Think big, right? So when you come to think about an idea, think about an innovation, think about a concept, think of it in a big way. Think of it in a big way. Like, this masjid, mashallah, this was a think big project. This wasn't, in fact, I was just talking to some friends yesterday about it. They don't know Bothell, they don't know masjid, they live way in the south. And I said, they actually picked up this house and they moved in and they built it. And he's like, what? Picked up the house? I'm like, that story is amazing to people. It's amazing to people. That's a fantastic think big idea. And whether that was planned from the beginning or we discovered halfway through, it doesn't matter. The point is, alhamdulillah, the project was executed, right? But how do you think big across having an impact across a broader society? What was the think big idea of the Sahaba radiallahu anhu? Let's talk about them for a second. What was the think big idea of the companions, you think? That almost everyone would have in common. Early days Mecca, what would it be?
Spread of deen.
Spread of deen. Spread of deen. No one was worried about telling other people about deen. And they were in real danger. Like it wasn't just like here, like you go to someone in Bothell, knock on the door and say, hey, I'm a Muslim, I'd like to talk to you about Islam. They say, get lost and shut the door. Like it wasn't that simple. They could actually go and tell the Quraysh CIA, hey, did you see that guy? He's talking about this new thing called Islam. We better grab him because they're trying to overthrow the government that we have built in Mecca. That was what they were like. Right? But no one cared. They still went and applied their maximum for Islam. That was one idea that everyone had. When you think of these ideas, like, and we'll talk about it some other time in detail, the Prophet ﷺ, when he was surrounded by the Ahzab, and he brings Salman al-Farisi from Persia, and Salman al-Farisi says, let's build a trench. Like, I know we talk about this like we know, but the project itself, to build a trench around the city, where the total fighting population was probably 400, 500, 600 people, is a massive undertaking. The whole population of Medina was about 2,000 people. The whole population of Medina. And so to take out a group to actually build and excavate this massive trench with no equipment, no bulldozers, nothing building into the ground, is a true think big idea. Right? So the issue with how we should think about the youth and how you should think about them yourselves is that this is, you need to think bigger besides the goals, inshallah, of getting your education and getting a job and all of that, all of which you have to do. You have to set another goal that is an over and above goal that has nothing to do with job and money. don't say it's Hajj, because Hajj doesn't count. You have to go to Hajj, right? Think about something bigger. And only each of you can come up with your own thing. Like, this isn't for me to sit down, right? To let you know. So the second thing that I'll just say relevant to this is, in Islam, when you attain the age of puberty, the counter starts ticking. The counter starts ticking. So when before your mother would nudge you to say, hey, get up and do your prayer, your father would nudge you to say, make your wudu and fast in Ramadan. When you are now hitting that 8th, 9th, 10th grade time range, khalas, you're an adult. And if you're an adult, it means that if you miss your prayer and you die when you were 17, you'll be punished like an adult that missed their prayer. You'll be punished like an adult. So from an Islamic perspective, when that timer flips over, the record camera is now on. And what I'm trying to say by saying this is, if you're now treated like an adult, the way you're thinking about life should also change. The way you're approaching life should also change. It's not going to happen overnight, from 7th grade to 8th grade or 8th grade to 9th grade, but you should start to have a different perspective on what you want to be. You know, when there's this term here, oh, when I grow up, I want to be this, I want to be a rocket scientist or whatever, you know, fantastic. Well, guess what? From the Islamic perspective, you've already grown up. So you've already grown up. So the thinking of the person that is now attained, puberty, that means that they should start to now think, in a different way. And there's a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ when he says, "Shababahu fima ablah." The end of the hadith. How did they invest time? What did they do with their shabab, with their younger years, right? Because shabab is important. The Prophet ﷺ says this because these are the years where you have energy, you have time, your mind is clear, you may not have a ton of responsibilities, you're not married. Is anyone here married from the kids? No? Are you married? No? You're good? Yeah? No? Okay. Alhamdulillah. So, inshallah, soon. Okay. So, you have time. You don't have the responsibilities of your parents. Your parents have to worry about you. Your parents have to worry about your mother. Your parents have to care for you. Your parents have to, take care of the house. Your parents have to, but you have time and you have energy. And we'll talk, inshallah, about some of these companions. The sabiqun as-sabiqun, as they're referred to in the Quran. Sabiqun as-sabiqun. Right? As-sabiqun as-sabiqun, many of them were very young. Zubayr ibn al-Awwam. Does anyone know Zubayr ibn al-Awwam? We're going to now have a Sahaba test. Let's actually pick this up next week. I know I've been going on for a while, so let's pick this up. Let's make it dua, inshallah. اللهم لك الحمد والشكر كما ينبغي لجلال وجهك وعظيم سلطانك. اللهم اغفر لنا ذنوبنا وكفر عنا سيئاتنا وتوفنا مع الابرار. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنه وفي الاخره حسنه وقنا عذاب النار. ربنا اصرف عنا عذاب جهنم إن عذابها كان غراما إنها ساءت مستقرا ومقاما. اللهم انصر الإسلام وأعز المسلمين. اللهم انصر الإسلام وأعز المسلمين. اللهم انصر الإسلام وأعز المسلمين. واعلو برحمتك كلمتي الحق والدين. ربنا هب لنا من أزواجنا وذرياتنا قرة أعين واجعلنا للمتقين إماما. ربنا اصرف عنا عذاب جهنم إن عذابها كان غراما إنها ساءت مستقرا ومقاما. ربنا اغفر لنا ولآبائنا وأمهاتنا وارحمهما كما ربيانا صغارا. اللهم نسألك رضاك والجنة ونعوذ بك من سخطك والنار. اللهم إنك عفو تحب العفو فاعف عنا. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله. جزاكم الله خير. See you guys next week, inshallah.